Hola, ¿cómo están? Bienvenidos al Cofre de Miguel. Hoy les traigo el segundo episodio de la serie Sex and the Silver Screen. En él veremos los comienzos del cine sonoro hollywoodense y la manera en que los productores trataban de meter en sus películas algunos diálogos subidos de tono o con algunas insinuaciones. Los comienzos de las actrices, por ejemplo, como Jean Harlow, Marlene Dietrich y Mae West, que tenían un físico privilegiado para este tipo de películas. Bueno, los dejo entonces con la segunda parte de Sex and the Silver Screen.
Adam and Eve first walked the Garden of Eden. Man has used every means at his disposal in an effort to capture the wonders of human sexuality. And with the coming of the 20th century, a bold and new invention ignited the imagination as never before: motion pictures. This seductive combination of shadows and light provided artists with an unprecedented opportunity to examine the mysteries of mankind's most basic instincts. While audiences gaped, censors condemned, and in the dark recesses of America's movie theaters, a sultry vamp became the silver screen's first sex symbol, and a chic stirred the passions of women's hearts the world over. Amidst cries that these flickering images were evil, an industry was born, and a boomtown called Hollywood became the film capital of the world, synonymous with sin, scandal, sex, and the silver screen. Ooh. In 1927, when the movies learned to talk, filmmakers began stretching the limits of sexual propriety, prompting cries of outraged indignation. The studios responded by appointing a conservative watchdog, General William H. Hayes. Hollywood was lost in the giddy delirium of the Jazz Age, and Mr. Hayes was determined to clean it up. On October 29th, 1929, Hollywood's dreams came to an end. The stock market had crashed, and in its wake, chaos. In one day, Americans lost $9 billion. Movie audiences shrank, and the motion picture industry was scrambling for solutions. For most filmmakers, there was only one button to push, and it was marked sex.
The Depression has hit movie people as hard as everyone else, and the studios are trying to save themselves, it seems, at any cost, to standards. Endeavoring to preach morality in this cataclysm is like a voice crying in the wilderness. Will Hayes.
That beat gives me a wicked sensation. My conscience wants to take a vacation. Got voodoo head to toes, hot voodoo burn my clothes. I want to stop dancing, just wearing a smile.
Nothing American movie audiences had ever seen before could have prepared them for Marlene Dietrich.
Falling in love again, never once a fool. What's a girl to do? Can't help it. Love's always been my game, play it how I may. I was made that way. Can't help it.
If she had nothing but her voice, she she could break your heart with it. But she also has that beautiful body and the timeless loveliness of her face. Ernest Hemingway.
Falling in love again, never wanted to. What the girl to do can't help it.
As comfortable in a tuxedo as an evening gown, Marlene Dietrich reveled in the erotic appeal of sexual ambiguity.
May I have this? Of course.
In 1930, Will Hays received a visit from Martin Quigley, Catholic lobbyist and publisher of the Motion Picture Herald. Mr. Quigley had taken it upon himself to commission theologian Father Daniel Lord to draft a code of conduct for filmmakers. Mr. Hays was ecstatic.
My eyes nearly popped out when I read it. This was the very thing I had been looking for. Fundamentally, these were the 10 Commandments and the natural law which is written into the heart of every human being of sound reason and morals. Will Hays.
While movie studios went through the motions of adopting this new code, the Hays office, as the press liked to point out, was powerless to enforce it.
With a few unctuous phrases, Will H. Hays has cleansed the silver screen, twitched away those thorns in his flesh, the church leaders, and reassured, no one. The new code of film ethics, in our opinion, means exactly nothing. Outlook and Independent.
You are looking at Hollywood Boulevard, illuminated for miles in honor of the opening of Hell's Angels. You may have seen openings before, but you've never seen anything like this. For the first time in
No
history,
movie star presented a greater challenge to Mr. Hays' new production code than Jean Harlow.
the boulevard is decorated for miles. 500,000 people are crowding the streets to get a glimpse of the stars and celebrities. All tickets for the first night.
The first American sex symbol of the sound era, her appearance in the Howard Hughes film Hell's Angels turned every head in Hollywood.
Would you be shocked if I put on something more comfortable?
I'll try to survive.
Jean Harlow is the most sensational figure to get in front of the camera in some time. She'll probably always have to play these kinds of roles, but nobody ever starred possessing what she's got. Variety.
After signing a studio contract with MGM, Miss Harlow's image underwent a subtle transformation. From the Howard Hughes harlot to L.B. Mayer's platinum blonde bombshell. A tendency to caress herself in public and an unabashed sense of humor about sex made her a favorite with the press.
Why do audiences like you, Miss Harlow?
The men like me because I don't wear a brassiere. And the women like me because I don't look like a girl who would steal a husband. At least not for long.
But would you steal a husband, Miss Harlow?
Wouldn't that be like shoplifting in a secondhand store?
Are you wearing a brassiere now, Miss Harlow?
That sounds like a nearsighted question.
So gentlemen prefer blondes, do they? Yes, they do.
Jean Harlow's shocking public image received a fresh jolt when her private life spiraled into tragedy. Back in the summer of '32, she had married Paul Byrne, an MGM producer 22 years her senior. 2 months after the wedding, his nude corpse was discovered by the maid, a .38 slug in his head. Near the body, a cryptic note.
Dearest dear, unfortunately, this is the only way to make good the frightful wrong I have done you, and to wipe out my abject humiliation. I love you, Paul. P.S. You understand that last night was just a comedy. Paul Byrne.
Amid rumors of sexual deviation and impotence, studio chief L.B. Mayer thought his most popular young star had just murdered her husband. Rushing to the scene, before the police had even been notified, he sprang into action.
Mr. Mayer found a paper in a diary, and it had no date on it. It was not addressed to anybody, but it made a perfect suicide note. MGM producer Sam Marks.
The police didn't show up until late that afternoon and found only what the studio wanted them to find. Howard Strickling, MGM's publicity chief, fed the story of Mr. Burns' suicide and attended sexual details to the press, who had a field day.
LB is writing the script of the inquest. He and Strickling are deciding who'll get the starring roles. After all, fellas, there's no accident this place is known as Mayer's Valley of Retakes. Irving Thalberg.
Paul Burns' death remains a mystery. Although many film scholars continue to report his suicide, the facts of the case suggest that the producer may have been murdered by his first wife. Unfortunately, she was unavailable for questioning. Her nude body was discovered the next day, floating in the Sacramento River.
I can't understand why this terrible thing should have happened. As for the note left by Paul, I have no idea what it means. Jean Harlow.
Jean Harlow was one of America's most beloved motion picture stars, and public sympathy for this beautiful widow only increased her popularity.
I'd have liked to have gone to bed with Jean Harlow. She was a beautiful broad. The fellow that married her was impotent, and he killed himself. Why, I would have done the same thing. Groucho Marx.
I was reading a book the other day.
Reading a book?
Yes, it's all about civilization or something. A nutty kind of a book. Do you know that the guy says that machinery is going to take the place of every profession?
Oh, my dear. That's something you need never worry about.
If Miss Harlow got away with more on screen than any other film star of the early 1930s, it was due in part to her sense of humor. When L.B. Mayer cast her in Red Dust, she reportedly had only one question.
What kind of whore am I this time?
Hey! Hey! How many times have I told you to let down those curtains?
Why? They've all gone off to work.
You heard me. Let them down.
What's the matter? Afraid I'll shock the Duchess? Don't you suppose she's ever seen a French postcard?
The Hayes office called Red Dust a hard-boiled sex yarn.
Curtains down, and this is the last bath you'll ever...
Nevertheless, the film received its seal of approval.
Get out of there. Okay, what's the idea?
What?
Getting in that barrel.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'm going over Niagara Falls.
Jean Harlow plays a visiting lady of easy virtue. Now, however, her characterization is very skillfully compounded of honesty, humor, and sympathy. Her role, therefore, should be considered free from offense, inasmuch as she is never shown plying her trade. Will Hayes.
Turn around and give me the work.
What? Oh. I'm forgetting the expenses, huh?
Oh, Denny. No.
What's the matter?
Oh, please don't. This wasn't like that.
Red Dust would be the first of many collaborations between Miss Harlow and the greatest male sex symbol of his day, Clark Gable.
Here you are, kid. It isn't half enough. But when I get down to Saigon, there'll be more. Keep your chin up.
Of all the actors I've ever met, Clark Gable is the only real He-Man I've ever known. Director, John Huston.
A tough-talking man's man, Mr. Gable could be sweet to fallen women and callously disrespectful to high society ladies.
Oh, Betsy, you come with me, yes?
Yeah, get away. Let me tell you this. I'm not a one-woman man. I never have been, and I never will be. If you want to take your turn... All right. Makes you feel any better.
I knew when this man walked on the set. I didn't know which door he came in, but I knew he was there. This magnetic man had more sheer animal magic than anyone in the world. and every woman knew it. Joan Crawford.
We've had a lot of happy times together, haven't we?
The only happiness I've ever known.
In 1931, Mr. Gable was cast opposite Joan Crawford in Possessed.
This we bought at Tiffany's. The day you decided I should be called Mrs. Morland.
Well, it's a harmless way to make your position a little more pleasant.
The story of an illicit romance between a prominent politician and a girl from the wrong side of the tracks, the film immediately drew fire from the Hayes office.
Regrets?
I left school when I was only 12. Never learned how to spell regret.
There are two phases of worry in connection with the picture being produced under the title Possessed. First, the title, and second, the picture itself. Also, it seems there might be some value in eliminating the scene when Marion's cloak falls to the floor. This is the only suggestion of an actual sex scene in the picture. Will Hayes.
The Hayes office was struggling to force the financially strapped studios to toe the line, but the only line that interested Hollywood was the one at the box office. Will Hayes could make all the suggestions he wished, but lacking the power of enforcement, Possessed would be released with the offending cloak scene intact. Joan Crawford's rise to stardom resembles a script for one of her own melodramas. After winning a Charleston contest, the young flapper from Texas found herself in Hollywood, peddling her two greatest assets, a driving ambition and a devastating lack of modesty.
Venus of the Films. This is the title bestowed upon Joan Crawford by a popular motion picture magazine. It has been declared that Miss Crawford's measurements nearest approach those of the famous Venus de Milo. Los Angeles Examiner.
By the 1930s, Miss Crawford had graduated from flapper to floozy.
Hello, lads. Boys, I want you to meet Thompson. Sadie, meet the boys. Boys. And this is
Sadie Thompson, the hard-boiled siren of the South Seas. She leads a young missionary down the road to ruin in the steaming tropical jungle of Pago Pago.
The devil in you is strong, my poor Sadie Thompson. Evil has claimed you as its own.
You take care of your own evil, and I'll take care of mine. I know what you want. You want another scout. Well, you don't get mine. You don't fool me. You want to make me over your way, do you? Well, you just try it.
This is your last chance, Sadie Thompson. Kneel with me and pray.
Let go of me.
Sadie Thompson, you are doomed.
Ah, you make me laugh.
Throughout her long career, rumors about Joan Crawford's film debut were a favorite topic of Hollywood gossip.
You mean those pornographic movies she did? The ones we had to buy up? No way. That I'm never gonna tell. Listen, it was my job to make all our people adorable, and I did it. I spent my whole life inventing cover-ups, hiding everything from spitting on the sidewalks to murder. And I'm damned if I'm going to expose them now. MGM Publicity Chief Howard Strickling.
These stills are all that remain of Miss Crawford's blue movies, while copies of the films are reputed to be buried deep in the archives of Indiana's Kinsey Institute. University bylaws prohibit them from ever being publicly exposed. The tawdry folklore of the stag film is rife with stories of Hollywood personalities who started out in blue movies. In the 1930s, distribution of these films was strictly a clandestine matter. A traveling exhibitor, usually one step ahead of the law, would set up his own projection equipment and provide an evening's entertainment to a bunch of cigar-smoking lodge brothers. Occasionally, these entrepreneurs would even offer up blue cartoons. Well, so much for Mickey and Minnie Mouse. While pornography was strictly an underground industry, there were some producers in Hollywood whose pictures exploited drugs, nudity, and sex.
All right, you must play like that,
Known to distributors as Main Street films, they were produced outside the jurisdiction of the Hayes office and usually ran in neglected downtown theaters. Where mainstream studio films promised sex with racy titles or provocative advertising, the makers of Main Street films delivered.
Lurid sensationalism is successfully achieved in Lash of the Penitente. It will doubtless fill the requirements of bottom-grade houses down below Main Street, and if it gets by the censors, do a brisk business among the morbid-minded. Motion Picture Digest.
In their quest to exploit ever greater quantities of female flesh, exploitive producers use the pretext of anthropology to display the mysteries of the Dark Continent. Censors had no objection to the educational nature of these films, so long as the naked women were dark-skinned natives. In a similar vein, 1933 brought America its first peek inside a nudist colony.
Hello, Mac. Good morning, Doctor. Son, you're going to be embarrassed. I've got to confess that I am embarrassed. You don't grasp my meaning. You're going to be embarrassed if you keep your clothes on.
Hollywood insiders were kept laughing for weeks when Variety reported that the film crew was forced to shed their own clothing in order to gain access to the camp.
The nearest approach to clothing worn was by the sound mixer who sported a set of earphones. Daily Variety.
Would I be out of order if I asked you how you became a nudist?
Well, of course not. When I was a child, I was made miserable because of ill health. My folks tried all sorts of things, medicine and treatment, but it didn't seem to help much. Finally, they found a doctor who prescribed bathing my body in the open air. Why, since then, I don't know what it means to be sick.
Elijah became a lightning rod of controversy. After being shut down by police and denounced from pulpits across the land, a protracted legal battle ensued, with the film's producer challenging the notion that nudity, in and of itself, was obscene. It would take another 20 years before the Supreme Court would resolve that issue. When MGM's Broadway Melody walked off with the Best Picture Oscar in 1929, Hollywood didn't need Western Union to get the message. Musicals meant girls, and girls meant sex. RKO's Flying Down to Rio would set a new standard for the motion picture musical. Will Hayes was not impressed.
It is our opinion that the major problem in this picture is the close-up of the girls standing on the airplane. Wind blowing their scanty costumes while the camera focuses on intimate parts of their bodies. Now, after going through the picture in detail, we feel that this is practically a thorn in a bed of roses. Will Hayes.
There was no one in Hollywood, however, who could match the kaleidoscopic flights of fantasy created by Busby Berkeley.
If anybody wants to learn what can be done with the camera, they should study every shot Busby Berkeley ever made. He did it all. Gene Kelly.
No filmmaker in the 1930s flaunted the production code more successfully and with more delight than Busby.
Well, I never cared whether a girl knew her right foot from her left, so long as she was beautiful. Busby Berkeley.
Given the popularity of Busby's musicals, the Hayes office was inclined to look the other way. Berkeley taught the camera to dance, virtually inventing the art of motion picture choreography.
Very few people realize the sequence was done with the girls completely nude. Now, I asked the girls if they would mind, and they said they would do it if I closed the set and filmed only at night. It was the only time in any musical that this had been done. Busby Berkeley.
A true eccentric, even by Hollywood standards, Mr. Berkeley's personal life was as chaotic as his production numbers. He claimed to get his best ideas while soaking in the bathtub, and was known to cue his actors by firing a pistol. As fond of strong martinis as he was of great heights, Busby often had to be strapped into his beloved camera crane to keep from falling out.
A lot of people used to believe I was crazy. But I can truthfully say one thing. I gave them a hell of a show. Busby Berkeley.
What do we go for? Go see a show for. Tell the truth, we go to see you beautiful day.
Just like President Roosevelt's visions of prosperity, romance was just around the corner in every Busby Berkeley extravaganza.
Oh, dames are necessary to show business. Dames.
In an era of breadlines, depression, and wars, I tried to help people get away from all the misery, to turn their minds to something else. I wanted to make people happy, if only for an hour. Busby Berkeley.
Be there promptly by then. Better set your alarm.
In 1933, Prohibition was declared a failure, and the Volstead Act was repealed. Having lost the battle with liquor, concerned citizens turned their attention to the cinema.
You know, Ann, sometimes this taking you home in the middle of the night, all the lying, pussyfooting.
Don't say you don't like the pussyfooting. I love it.
By comparison, the picture game makes the dear departed liquor industry look like nothing at all. United States Congress.
You dirty little sneak.
Hollywood had grown increasingly daring in its portrayal of sex, and religious leaders across the country demanded action.
Have you ever had this tooth pulled before?
No!
This won't hurt you much.
The opening salvo was fired by a Catholic archbishop.
Catholics are called by God, the Pope, the bishops, and the priests to a united and vigorous campaign for the purification of cinema, which has become a deadly menace to morals.
Archbishop Amleto Cicognani.
Protestant and Jewish groups immediately offered their support.
Thousands of Protestant ministers and laity say thank God that the Catholics are at last opening up on this foul thing as it deserves. The Christian Century.
The Depression was tightening its grip, and Hollywood was more concerned with survival than with sin. Paramount and RKO were in receivership. Universal and Fox were edging toward bankruptcy. Even the mighty Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer had asked their personnel to take a pay cut.
The producers are in a state of panic and chaos. They've rushed for the bed springs and lingerie the moment the phantom of empty seats rose to clutch them. Cecil B. DeMille.
By 1933, America's movie screens were awash with gold diggers, harlots, and women of easy virtue. Into these tempestuous waters came a galleon under full sail, Mae West.
Mae West? Now there's a real vamp. Theda Bara.
Often called the finest actress to ever walk the streets, Miss West was already notorious in New York City. Her controversial Broadway play, Sex, had been closed by New York's finest, landing the star and authoress in jail on obscenity charges.
Sex and I have a lot in common. I don't want to take any credit for inventing it, but may I say in my own modest way that I have rediscovered Mae West.
Hey, Gorilla! Come here.
Hello, Marty.
In 1932, Paramount teamed Mae West with tough guy George Raft in Night After Night. She demanded rewriting privileges and proceeded to hand herself all the best lines.
Oh, honey, how's business? Fine. You been insulted lately? Goodness, what beautiful diamond. Goodness had nothing to do with it, dearie. Joey, well, come here and kiss me, you dog. Let's take a look at you. Well, you're looking great. Who's your tailor now? Oh, not bad, huh?
Mae West stole everything but the cameras. I never made another picture with her. I knew she had me licked. George Raft.
Offered a free hand in the selection of her next picture, Miss West decided to shoot her Broadway hit, Diamond Lil. Despite the play's unsavory reputation, Paramount said go. Across town, Harry Warner was shocked.
Dear Mr. Hayes, please wire immediately whether I can believe my ears that Paramount has arranged to make Diamond Lil with Mae West. Stop. Recollect that it was absolutely definite that Diamond Lil was not to be produced. Stop. I am not sending this wire as a protest, but I want to know how to run our business in the future. Harry Warner.
Paramount, in an effort to diffuse the controversy, retitled the film, She'd Done Him Wrong.
I always did like a man in a uniform. And that one fits you grand. Why don't you come up sometime, see me? I'm home every evening.
Yeah, but I'm busy every evening.
Busy? So what are you trying to do, insult me?
In the picture, Mae West seduces a young Catholic missionary, played by Cary Grant.
Meetings in Jacobson's Hall every evening.
The film, which director Lowell Sherman called The Great American Wet Dream, saved Paramount from financial ruin.
You know, I met your kind before. Why don't you come up sometime, huh?
Well,
Don't be afraid, I won't tell.
But,
Come up, I'll tell your fortune. Ah, you can be had.
But the Catholic Church was indignant.
She Done Him Wrong is the filthy Diamond Lil slipping by under a new name. The motion picture industry will be very unwise to incur the militant enmity of the Catholic hierarchy. Father Daniel Lord.
While rival studios publicly cried foul, executive dining rooms were abuzz with the possibilities. Harry Warner was the first to drop all pretense of piety and cast Barbara Stanwyck in Babyface.
Yeah, I'm a tramp, and who's to blame? My father. A swell start you gave me. Ever since I was 14, what's it been? Nothing but men, dirty, rotten men. And you're lower than any of them. I'll hate you as long as I live.
In an effort to pacify the Catholic Church, Warner Brothers tried to promote Babyface as a social problem film. But the critics saw things differently.
Say, I like it here. How about a job?
Babyface is blue and nothing else. Anything hotter than this would call for an asbestos audience blanket. Variety.
Have you had any experience?
Plenty. I'd rather wait in there. I hate crowds. Don't you?
The boss won't be back for an hour.
Well, then why don't we go in and talk this over?
Haven't I told you never to come beyond the front of this desk?
Oh, but I get so lonesome out there all by myself.
But don't do that. How do you expect me to get any work done?
Hold me close.
Barbara Stanwyck handles her role of perpetual prostitute in a manner so astute and workmanslike as to make the picture a positive menace to silly or unreasoning girls. Now I suppose you'll all go out and take a look at the film, and thus encourage the industry to turn out more like it. May Tinney, film critic.
Barbara Barbara Stanwyck had built her career playing hard-boiled dames who knew more about seduction than most men. Her appearance in films like A Lost Lady and 10 Cents a Dance prompted screenwriter Herman Mankiewicz to declare,
"My God, I could just sit and dream of being married to her, having a little cottage out in the hills, vines around the door. I'd come home from the office tired and weary, and I'd be met by Barbara, walking through the door, holding an apple pie and wearing no drawers."
Barbara Stanwyck wasn't alone in her assault on the production code. Each of Hollywood's beleaguered studios began testing the limits.
In the gathering chaos and economic night, some voices called for the repudiation of the code and all its prior restrictive agreements. Some felt that if the industry was to save itself and keep its thousands of people in their jobs, it had to let her go Gallagher with anything permitted to bring in the money. Will Hayes.
Emboldened by the success of Warner Brothers, Paramount decided to go for broke. Studio president Adolf Zucker announced his intention to film William Faulkner's controversial story of seduction, rape, and betrayal, Sanctuary.
Sanctuary is the most sickening novel ever written in this country. It is utterly unthinkable as a motion picture. Lamar Trotty, Hayes' office.
Will Hayes ordered Sanctuary banned from production.
We simply must not allow the production of a picture which will offend every right-thinking person that sees it.
Paramount paid no heed and shot the film anyway under the title The Story of Temple Drake. Magazine editor P.S. Harrison called the studio's decision further evidence that federal control of motion pictures was necessary.
If Paramount proceeds to film the story of Temple Drake, they will do the greatest harm to the motion picture industry that has ever been done in its entire history. Magazine editor P.S. Harrison.
Give me that coat. I need it.
Pretty minute.
At the Hayes office, the general's troops urged him to get tough.
I, for one, think the time has come to crack down as hard as we can somewhere. Lamar Trotty, Hayes' office.
In Washington, political pressure was mounting.
Censorship is needed as an assurance that there shall be no lapse into the old, loose ways. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year are spent by the public on moving picture shows, and the state has a right to know that the money is not spent in ways harmful to its citizenry and damaging to society. Senator Henry L. Myers.
Mr. Hayes called a meeting of Hollywood studio chiefs. He warned that the more than 100 censorship bills pending would far outstrip any previous attempts to federally regulate the motion picture industry. As usual, the producers promised to reform, but within a few months, Mae West, America's top box office draw, was gearing up for her next assault on American morality.
And they call me Sister Honky Tonk, get over dirty. They call
I wrote the story myself. It's all about a girl who lost her reputation but never missed it. Mae West.
Mae West is today the biggest conversation provoker and all-around box office bet in the country. She's as hot an issue as Hitler. Needless to say, this opus will scarcely get on the reformers' recommended lists. Variety.
kisses till you're
Through glorification of body over brain, with a loud laugh at censorship and common decency, this picture is merely a continuation of Mae West's money-making by raw suggestiveness, physiological invitation, and brazen vulgarianism. The Christian Century.
The time had come for Will Hayes to take a stand. He hired an enforcer, Joe Breen, and sent him on a fact-finding tour of the movie colony.
This burg is probably the madhouse of the universe. Recently, the head of a prominent studio was caught in bed fornicating with his neighbor's wife, by his own wife, who failed to kill both of the bedfellows simply because she neglected to unfasten the lock on the pistol. A studio head, whom you and I know personally very well, is just now the laugh of the town because of his conspicuous and public liaison with a star, who is reputed to be the most notorious pervert in all Hollywood. And so it goes. Joe Breen.
Fueling the fire was the Episcopal Committee on Motion Pictures. On April 11, 1934, the organization announced it would recruit a Legion of Decency.
I wish to join the Legion of Decency, which condemns vile and unwholesome moving pictures. I unite with all who protest against them as a grave menace to youth, to home life, to country, and to religion. I condemn absolutely those salacious motion pictures which are corrupting public morals and promoting a sex mania in our land. I hereby promise to remain away from all motion pictures except those which do not offend decency and Christian morality. Legion of Decency Pledge.
Joe Breen was determined to save the studios from themselves, and the Legion of Decency had given him the means to do so. A boycott was the perfect weapon, and the Mae West film, It Ain't No Sin, the ideal target.
It Ain't No Sin is a vulgar and highly offensive yarn, which is quite patently a glorification of prostitution and violent crime without any compensating moral values. We deem it our duty to say to you that under the provisions of the production code, we will be compelled to reject this picture in toto, if and when it is presented for our approval. Joe Breen.
Well, it's better to be looked over than overlooked.
Won't you sing one?
It Ain't No Sin ultimately went into production, and as promised, the Breen office ordered numerous cuts. When it was finally released as Belle of the 90s, the movie sported a seal of approval and a tacked-on wedding scene that Variety called an obvious courtesy to Joe Breen.
I hereby pronounce you man and wife.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you.
And I want to wish you a lot of happiness.
Thank you.
Good luck to both of
Thank
you.
you, dear. Thank you.
And I want to wish you the same. I'm the best man.
Oh, you're the best man, huh? That's what you think.
When I knew the censors were after my films, I wrote scenes for them to cut. The scenes were so rough that I'd have never used them. But they worked as a decoy. They cut those and left the stuff I wanted. Mae West.
I'm an accidental woman in an oriental mood for love. And I feel a thrill of China when I see a yellow Buddha moon above.
With the release of Klondike Annie, Mae West would make her most formidable enemy, publishing tycoon William Randolph Hearst.
The Mae West picture, Klondike Annie, is a filthy picture. It is an affront to the decency of the public and to the interests of the motion picture profession. Will Hayes must be asleep to allow such a thing to come out. After you've had a couple of good editorials regarding the indecency of this picture, then do not mention Mae West in our papers again. William Randolph Hearst.
Oh, Eve, what have you done?
I've just made a little more...
The final act of Mae West's fall from grace would be played out not on the silver screen, but on national radio in a racy version of The Garden of Eden.
Eve, it's as if I see you for the first time. You're beautiful.
And you fascinate me.
Your eyes.
Oh, tell me more.
Your lips. Come closer. I want to hold you closer. I want to...
You want to what?
Eve, what was that?
That was the original kiss.
Following the broadcast, the American press demanded blood. And in Washington, Congressman William Connery urged the FCC to revoke the license of the National Broadcasting Company.
If a company has not sufficient sense not to allow such a program, then censorship must be exercised. Congressman Connery.
On any other day of the week, the skit would have justified the severest criticism from the standpoint of good taste. But on Sunday, such a broadcast represents the all-time low in radio, the New York Sun.
With Will Hayes on her back, the press nipping at her heels, and the nation's clergy calling for her head, Mae West was fired.
I might have brought the censors into Hollywood, but I also saved the industry. Paramount, 1,700 theaters. Mae West.
When Mae West sashayed out the Paramount gate, she left behind these words.
Don't forget, come up and see me sometime.
Hollywood is the only place where you can say, come up and see me sometime, and not get taken up on it. Mae West.
The battle for control of the nation's movie screens was over. Will Hayes had won.
The situation looks desperate to me. The way I figure it, they want me to make only wishy-washy milk and water kind of pictures. And I know as a showman, if I do this, the theater goers will put me out of business. So any way I look at it, I seem to be licked. Hollywood producer.
In November of 1936, Will Hayes traveled to the Vatican to receive the personal congratulations of Pope Pius XI.
Mr. Hayes, we have asked you to come here in order that we might express to you the appreciation of the Church for the improvement in the moral content of the American motion picture. You sit at the valve in the conduit through which flows the principal amusement of the great majority of all the people in the world. We are deeply interested in the success of your efforts. Pope Pius XI.
For all intents and purposes, sex had been washed from the silver screen. Producers who once believed that they could ignore the pronouncements of Will Hayes and Joe Breen were forced to admit that the Hayes Code was the law of the land. The challenge now was to find ways to get around it, and filmmakers in the golden age of Hollywood were nothing if not ingenious.